afternoon, everybody. My name is Lorna Swisher. I'm the Assistant Director of Revitalization for Heritage Ohio. And when we come into a community and talk about doing a training, one of the things that we ask the manager, and in this case it was Jeff, we said, what do you want to celebrate in your community and what do you need help with? And one of the things that Jeff was quick to say was vacant property ordinance is a big issue in this community. So that was the reason that we put together this fabulous panel today. And of course, the female entrepreneurs this morning, that was a fabulous celebration of all things Middletown. So I'm very pleased to present to you our three panelists today. What we're going to do, just so you understand the format a little bit, each will do a brief presentation on their area of expertise, and then you will have plenty of opportunity as the audience to ask questions about vacant property legislation. Each of them will also talk about where they are in the process. The city of Lebanon is very new to this. The city of Sandusky has been doing it for a long time, and the city of Sydney also has had a vacant property legislation in place for a while. So we're going to start with some introductions. I have Lieutenant Tom Salmons from the Sandusky Fire Department. He's been a firefighter paramedic with the Sandusky Fire Department for the past 16 years. He served as a company officer prior to moving into the position serving as fire marshal in the Fire Prevention Bureau. Lieutenant Salmons oversees community risk reduction, public and departmental education, fire safety inspections, plan review, and fire investigations. Again, joining us all the way from Sandusky, so thank you very much, Lieutenant Salmons, for being here. All the way over on your left would be Scott Bronca. He graduated from Ohio University in 1994 with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and received a master's in public administration degree from the University of Dayton in 2009. Scott served as the Deputy City Manager for the City of Lebanon for over 16 years and as City Manager for the past 6 years. Scott has played a key role in the planning and execution of numerous downtown Lebanon enhancement projects, public roadway and utility infrastructure projects, park and trail expansion projects, business expansion efforts, as well as managing various service operations that reflect a growing and vibrant community. And in the middle is Kyle Havener. Kyle is the Community and Economic Development professional with a strong background in building, planning, zoning, and economic development. As Community Development Specialist with the City of Sydney, he administers state and local economic development programs, engages with developers and investors, and manages the city's vacant property and rental registration programs. So we are going to be attacking this from a couple of different issues, as you can tell. We've got a city manager who has brought the legislation into the community. We have a community development specialist who will talk about the value of this kind of legislation in a community. And then Lieutenant Salmons will talk about it from a safety perspective. So our first speaker is Lieutenant Salmons.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. So Sandusky has been doing this for a while. One of the biggest things that I can say as far as having this program is to have the buy-in from all the stakeholders. Originally in about 2007, 2008, back when our department had battalion chiefs, we had a battalion chief in fire prevention. He initiated this, started doing the research to get it in play, and unfortunately it never took off. So as far back as 2007 is when this program could have started, but it sat dormant until we got a more progressive chief to come into the administration and then kind of drive this forward. So officially this program's been in place since 2012. At that time we had over 130 vacant commercial buildings in the city of Sandusky. So the city of Sandusky has a population, full-time population of 25,000. We do have Cedar Point, which adds anywhere from 45 to 50,000 throughout the summer months. So our population, we have a lot of visitors. So the commercial building things, they absolutely have a safety component that's to them. Currently, so the success of this program, so in 2012, the then fire marshal sent out over 130 certified mail letters to get certain vacant buildings to register. Currently, I've got about 15 that are on our list, so it's drastically reduced over the years, and it's really helped to identify some of these problem areas. As far as why the community would need this type of a legislation, so on a fire department specific perspective, vacant commercial buildings, they pose a multitude of risks to the community. This list of issues include collapse hazards, increased risk for fires, vandalism, squatters, criminal activity, and an increased risk to first responders. Vacant commercial buildings are actually identified in the Ohio Fire Code. We're currently under the 2017 Fire Code. Towards the end of summer, we'll have a new edition that's in, and it still focuses on these vacant buildings because they present such a hazard to not only the community, but also to first responders. There was a case years ago that occurred in Chicago where it was a vacant building, it was not properly maintained, there was a fire inside. Anytime that there's a potentially occupied structure, the fire department makes entry and does a search for life safety purposes. The building consequently collapsed and killed 2 firefighters. So vacant building registration is really important to be able to identify those hazards, to look inside the building, be able to see, okay, do they have a sprinkler system? Are they maintaining it? Is the roof, what's the integrity of the walls? All these different things that we can see during daylight hours instead of having to wait when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and it's filled with smoke and fire conditions. Sandusky needed a means to promote community development and investment and also minimize what we call target hazards in the community. There were a number of properties owned that there were no vacant or foreseeable plans for development. This legislation encourages the building owner to do something with the building. So the whole goal of this is it's not a moneymaker for the fire department, it's not a moneymaker for the city. The whole goal is, unfortunately, money is what gets most people's attention. So by putting a dollar amount out there that increases each year, that's how we try to encourage these people to not just sit on these buildings and do nothing with them. Some of the highlights as far as the legislation in Sandusky goes, commercial, residential fees, etc. So the legislation addresses specifically commercial properties only. The city of Sandusky is made up, we have a fire department, we have a chief administrative assistant, I serve in fire prevention, and then we have 48 firefighter paramedics on the backside in suppression. So there's a building department, which is comprised of, we have a chief building official, we have a building inspector, a mechanical plumbing inspector, and an electrical inspector. Then across the hall, they have a residential code enforcement. So residential code enforcement, they're the ones that are help policing all the different issues with gutters, paint, lawn, those types of things. Currently in May, we are going to have an administrative meeting in the city to kind of expand on our current ordinance, because as a fire department official, I identify a building as vacant, I send out certified letters. If it's an LLC, then I got to find the statutory agent, so they also receive a copy of this letter. And then once they register, they become on our list, they pay the fee. However, the ordinance per the fire code enforcement side, I don't really have the enforcement ability to approach the growing weeds or some of the nuisance related stuff. So we are actually going to expand ours so that our building department can have a little bit more teeth to be able to approach those things, because identifying them and securing them are great. However, we got to take that and do a little bit better with the appearance and the degradation of the building. So for us, our fees start at $400 a year. So basically how it works is I go through the community, going from place to place, I identify a vacant building, and I go back and I get to the auditor's website, get the information, and then that's when these certified mailers start to go out. They have 30 days to register from the receipt of that paper. For Sandusky, if you fail to register, it is considered a first-degree misdemeanor and it's tried criminally in our municipal court. That does present some challenges, specifically with LLCs, because what do you do with an LLC? So when it's a person, we're able to get more compliance. Those instances are fewer and farther between. Those were definitely more prominent in the beginning of this program. So eventually, once you hit your 5th year, you're at $6,400 a year. So then every year after that, it's $6,400. Now, if we have, we'll say, ABC Warehouse, I identify that that's a vacant building, I send out the paperwork, they register, they prove they have insurance on the building, we do a fire inspection to make sure that there's no obvious holes or voids in the floor, it doesn't appear that the roof's going to collapse. Then we're able to get that registration fee and it goes into a fund. Then they submit either a demolition plan or a development plan, and if they meet the terms of that within that fiscal year, that money is returned. So like I said at the beginning, this isn't a moneymaker. That's not the intent of our program. The program is to just identify these buildings and get something done with them. So if you get up to that point, though, where we're 2-3 years in, that initial money is then foregone because you didn't meet the terms of that development plan in year 1, 2, or 3. So money can accrue, but it's in the ordinance that's specifically used to then be repurposed back into vacant commercial buildings, specifically like training equipment or fire suppression equipment. It's not anything that we can just go spend on anything. There is a clause in there. It is at the discretion of the fire chief. So this is very important. So we have a few properties we've identified as vacant. However, they were privately developed. There was no grants or assistance from the city or any other organizations, and they've invested their own time and money into these properties. They look great on the exterior. They look great on the interior. Example is we have an old PNC bank, completely remodeled, renovated, excellent building. The owners of that building are very particular, and they don't want to just allow any tenant in there. So by definition of our ordinance, they need the vacant commercial building. However, it's not in the same condition as some of our other dilapidated buildings. So the chief has the option that he can waive that registration fee. And I think that's a really important portion of that ordinance because it's not one size fits all. There is some exceptions and some subjectivity to this. And this program is citywide. It's not just our downtown area. So the entire east, west, and downtown areas, this program applies. So right now, we're getting ready to do a big downtown Sandusky revitalization. So downtown is probably one of our better areas that has gotten compliance and some development, but a lot as you start to go outside the downtown area, that's when the vacant buildings definitely start to pick up. We talked about why it's important because of the line of duty debt. We also talked about there's significant risks to the safety of the community and firefighters. Oftentimes, doing these inspections, we find large holes, weakening structural members, collapse hazards. So by registering these properties, the owners are required to do something with the building. It gives us, as a fire department, a foot in the door to conduct a hazard risk analysis to identify higher risk buildings. We can then take advantage of knowing the ins and the outs of the building, like I said, during normal operating hours, not under fire and smoke conditions. We have a marking system that we utilize, so Fire Code has a section on vacant buildings and identifying them. So currently, we do not have any commercial buildings that have this indication on it, but it was a red metal sign with an X on it. 1/ or a half an X or a complete X. And what that told us is if there was a red sign with a large white X on the building, we did not enter. It meant that the risk versus reward that we were going to subject ourselves to do not go into the building. That would be a specific defensive operations only. Fortunately, I'm happy to say we don't have any of those buildings because some of the vacant buildings that we have that were in that condition, we've got developers that are in there and they've strengthened the structural components and it's gravely improved. So those severe hazards no longer exist. They might be ugly, but they're not a huge safety issue. So specifically with the fire department, as I said, we are the stewards of the ordinance. So anybody throughout the fire department or city legislation, city administration can say, hey, there's this building, can you check it out? And I go through, filter it out to see if it meets then the criteria of our vacant building. So if a building is unoccupied for greater than 30 days, that's when it trips the registration of a vacant commercial building. Now, it does open the door to a lot of conversations because a lot of people think that what they're doing with their building is okay. However, we can't do personal storage in a general business district. So on the fire side of things, I've been able to learn a lot of things as far as the building code, community development, and zoning regulation. So when I said earlier about having everybody that's a stakeholder on board, it's crucial because we really do lean on the building department to enforce their component, zoning to back us up to say, I said, hey, yeah, this is a vacant commercial building, but I can only push this so far. Now it needs to go to a zoning appeals board. So getting the buy-in is crucial. Once it's registered, like I said, it's a we do it on a not traditional calendar year. So, because if I have somebody identified in November and I have them pay $400, if I was to then make them register again in January and pay $800, I feel like that's doing our community a disservice. So I have a spreadsheet that I order everything in. So if I send it out in March of 22, March of 23, it comes around again, and then it's just a matter of record keeping to keep on that year cycle. And then if things change, the property sells. The other thing that we do is we fill out an affidavit of vacancy, take that to the recorder's office, so that some of these properties, which there are a small handful that they don't want to register, we have an LLC company out of Georgia that cannot do anything about it. So then it goes to the recorder's office, so then if there's a sale of that building, then we're able to recuperate those registration costs that have been delinquent. They submit either a demolition plan or a development plan, and then like I said, if they accomplish that goal, they get that money back. We do the inspection, and like I said, we mark everything with those X markings. So I guess the cliff notes from all of this is literally to say, get buy-in from everybody. It benefits. Yes, I take it personal because I have a kind of biased opinion for the fire department, so it helps to keep us safe. We take calculated risks. We say we risk a lot to save a lot and risk a little to save a little. So if we can identify these target hazards and ensure that they're properly secured to minimize the opportunity for people to be inside and minimize the risks inside as well, that helps to protect us. But then also, if these inspections are conducted, we're able to make sure that the fire alarm systems, the sprinkler systems are up to date, so then fire is actually kept in check and there's early notification, which then minimizes dollar loss, which then minimizes a slew of other effects to the local economy. So community-wise, encouraging people to do something, it really helps to clean it up. And like I said in the beginning, money is what really gets people's attention. So that's kind of what we do in Sandusky. As a nutshell, started in 2012, but then when that nasty COVID thing hit, the chief at the time gave everybody reprieve. So the last time we had people register was in 2019. I moved into fire prevention in 2022, and the administration said, okay, 2023, we got to get this program back going again. That was a challenge, which we will expand on later towards the end of this. Once you have momentum, keep that momentum, which COVID is what it is, and it squashed a lot of things, but it was very difficult to take something that was really good off the ground, that kind of nosedived, and pull it back out of the ashes again. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. As Lorna mentioned, Lebanon's new to this, so I'm really here to learn from these guys on the pitfalls. But no, we started our vacant building registration program in late September of last year, is when City Council adopted the ordinance. And I can say it was a result of lengthy discussion with City Council. It was about a 2-month process that we went through in terms of when we first presented it to them to ultimately when they voted on it. And in terms of, I think why, staff or the city felt like we needed this legislation, I think first and foremost, public safety was definitely at the heart of it, and especially with fire hazards. We have an old kind of industrial building in our downtown where the property owner had actually, unbeknownst to us, disabled the fire suppression system. So, those types of things where if there's not a trigger to get a vacant building on kind of a routine inspection process, those types of things can happen. And certainly our fire department, I think, was concerned about, the buildings. We don't have a lot of vacant buildings in Lebanon, but we certainly do have some. So there was the public safety component, and then I think another key aspect was property maintenance. And our ordinance is probably a little bit different than Sandusky's in that, we do connect the requirement to register your building with some sort of an unsafe condition or a property maintenance violation. So you can have a vacant building, and if you're maintaining it in a way that it's not, creating a hazard, unsafe condition, or if it's not any sort of property maintenance violation status, you don't have to register your building. And that was a big topic of discussion with our city council that we can kind of get into. But definitely public safety, property maintenance, and then really just economic development or economic vitality was important to us. We do have kind of a single owner or a couple owners that in our community that own quite a bit of the property. Some is in excellent condition and contributing to the vitality of our community. Some is not, and I think there was some community frustration with some of these buildings just kind of sitting there vacant and not really having a plan on how to activate that and how to add value to our community. So I think that was kind of part of the discussion with City Council, is just trying to encourage property owners to activate those buildings. So the process, like I said, it was a relatively lengthy process with our City Council, numerous work session discussions on the topic, and really most of the discussion kind of centered around the community good versus individual property rights. I would describe Lebanon as a pretty conservative community, certainly values property rights. So I think anytime our council looks at these types of ordinances or legislation that maybe adds another layer of regulation, tends to get quite a bit of discussion and oversight. And throughout that process, I think we kind of started with, okay, every vacant building is going to register, and kind of through that discussion process, ultimately we landed on, what is the definition of an unsafe building? It's one of the criteria, if a building's not unsafe, not an issue, doesn't look like it's vacant, it's just unoccupied, then those property owners, those landlords who are doing their part and taking good care of their property shouldn't be penalized. So ultimately, that's kind of where our ordinance sets. If you want a copy of the ordinance, reach out to me. I can get it to you. But part of that definition of unsafe is kind of the obvious aspects of a building being unsafe. But there's some nuances in there that really tie that definition of unsafe as connected with some sort of a property maintenance violation, if there's overgrown yards, brush, that type of thing. That is what can trigger the registration requirement. I think it was also important for our city council to ensure it was consistent. So the ordinance applies to both residential and commercial properties. It applies to our entire community, including our downtown. They really didn't want to get into kind of differentiating areas, so it is very consistent, I guess, from that aspect. The fees are similar, I think, to Sandusky. It starts with a $250 annual registration fee, and then every year after that doubles up to, I think it's $3,750 is the maximum. So like I said, right now we're in the process of getting these properties registered, working with the property owners. It was important for us when the legislation was adopted to not just go out and send violation notices kind of right off the bat. So obviously with this being something new, we sent out friendly letters to the properties that we felt kind of fell into that category by the definition of the ordinance. And there's about 10, so it wasn't a huge number in Lebanon, but there's probably about 10 properties that ultimately we're getting into this process. And I think that, if you launch it in your community, I would expect a lot of questions on the front end. We sent those first letters out. Some of them got ignored, most of them got ignored. So then we kind of transitioned into actually sending the violation notices, and that's when the call started. So it's been an education process with the property owners, but so far, it's moving smoothly. We do obviously have exceptions to the legislation or to the registration requirement. If you have an active building permit or you're in kind of an active renovation state, obviously you don't need to register. If it's been fire damaged, you don't need to register. And then if you are currently listing the property with a licensed real estate agent, you've got essentially a 12-month exemption from having to register. So we wanted to make sure that those properties where there actually are, working towards selling the property, that they weren't automatically kind of falling into the registration requirement. I will say it was not a unanimous vote for our city council, so again, lots of discussion on it, just kind of weighing, the regulation side of it and why do we really need this versus, what folks felt like was best for the community. But ultimately, the majority of city council did feel like this was in the best interest of the community, so we're now moving forward with everything. And kind of layered it in terms of who handles the program. We've rolled it into our planning department, so we already had a property maintenance inspector that was handling your traditional property maintenance issues. So this has just become kind of another subset of his responsibility. And I think, like Tom said, it's not about the money for us. It really is just trying to make sure that there's some accountability with what, in the grand scheme of things, is a really a handful of properties or just a few properties. But if you happen to live next to one of these properties, obviously it's important to you. And some of these other properties are highly visible properties downtown that I think the community was frustrated just with the overall general inactivity. So that's it in a nutshell, and that's what I want.
Hello, everyone. Kyle Havener again. So we, in the city of Sydney, I think this really stemmed from that 2008, 2009 housing crisis.
Sorry, right here in top left.
Hello. All right. So again, Kyle Havener, city of Sydney, and we've had this on the books since 2018. I think it really stemmed from the aftermath of the housing crisis, 2008, 2009. And Sandusky basically wrote the white paper on it, so we took a look at theirs very heavily and crafted our vacant property ordinance from that. It encompasses commercial and residential. And I think starting off, when we originally pitched this, it was before I actually got hired on with the city as the vacant property inspector. So this was my whole job when I first started with the city, was to come up with this program and stand it up and get it adopted. We were using census numbers originally from that, and it said we had 800 to 1,000 vacant properties in the city. Well, we quickly found out after I was hired and ran through the data that was counting actual housing units. So triplex was 3 numbers on that. So we were quickly able to kind of lower that number. And then I think shortly after I got hired, this is before we actually adopted the ordinance, we did a windshield survey. So I actually went out there and I drove around and took pictures of all of the properties. And I think we came up to around 300 vacant properties in the city. And this was in wintertime too, so we had a lot of people that were already in Florida, snowbirds. So that we were able to count those numbers as well. Then through the adoption process with the city council, we got that number lowered down to 100 because they wanted to exclude those properties that were the snowbirds. So similar to your point, we came up with a definition of vacant property that you had to meet certain criteria. And if it was basically a house that was move-in ready, it was being maintained, you didn't have to register that property. So we got that number down after the adoption of the ordinance down to around 100 properties. In the last 6 years, we've been able to reduce that number to around 50, with about 25 properties being in compliance, and then the other 25 we've done the affidavit of title and recorded that to the property. So in a title search, that will get flagged to a prospective buyer saying there's money owed to the city for that property. And then we also have the exemption. I think ours sound very similar ordinances with exemptions for building permits, and if it's actively listed for sale, they'll get an exemption and won't have to register that property. And the exemptions for the building permits would last for the length of the building permit. So if it comes and they didn't fulfill that requirement, then they're going to have to register that property. And I think this, so questions asked why the community need this kind of legislation. And again, it stemmed from the housing crash in 2008, 2009. And I think individuals in the community really started taking notice that there were becoming more and more vacant properties and that they were becoming deteriorated, right? So it took some time to fully recognize that. You know, when we got this adopted in 2018, there was quite a few years there. But I think our leadership in Sydney were very proactive in wanting to pursue this. And of course, our fire department kind of led the charge in getting that adopted. So public safety was definitely at the forefront. And as we witnessed this gradual accumulation of vacant properties, that we knew we needed to mitigate it because vacant properties become attractive nuisances for criminal activity. There's that whole broken window theory that can lead to a simple broken window can be a factor that indicates a community is in decline or that neighborhood is in decline, and it just has this sort of trickling effect that can affect more neighbors and more properties. So that was certainly something we wanted to kind of address. And then also at the same time that we did this, I think we had an active land bank that got quite a bit of funding from the state budget to demolish properties. So these were properties that taxes were in arrears for 365 days, and essentially zombie properties. No ownership was being claimed. So we were able to work very side by side with our land bank and addressing a lot of these vacant properties. Some of the sort of standout highlights of our legislation: we have to appoint an owner agent if they reside over 50 miles from the city of Sydney. Vacant property owners have to maintain, of course, the property and the grounds. So we have this sort of additional element of property maintenance that we've included in the ordinance itself, such as waterproofing, not waterproofing, but winterizing like a pool or a hot tub, making sure that stuff's done. So don't become mosquito harbors. And then we also do a yearly inspection for commercial, and we do at the time of registration for residential, and every third year after that. Let's see. We also included council definitely wanted a carrot in the ordinance, so we also had a development plan put in place. And again, if you follow through, you give us a timeline of your developments and how you want to redevelop that property, you will get all the money that you put in. If it takes you 3 years and you've got $1,600 now wrapped up in this, we'll give you that money back if you follow through with your development plan. It hasn't been very successful. I don't think anybody's even applied for it. So I don't know if yours has been very successful or not. No. So I don't know if I would include that or not. I came up with another program that I'd like to highlight here in a few minutes, but I think it works a lot better to get properties developed. Let's see, we have a similar fee structure. Residential starts off at $200 and doubles every year. Commercial starts off at $400 and doubles every year up to the fifth year, which is $3,200 and $6,400 respectively. So it can add up pretty quick. And that number, those assessments and these vacant properties, they end up getting a lot of code enforcement done, a lot of grass abatements, right? So it all gets assessed to the property. And then this dollar amount that's owed to the city or the taxes, it just keeps kind of stacking up and stacking up. So we came up with a program called the Revive program. The Revive program really aimed to revitalize and repurpose the vacant properties, right? Runs very side by side with our vacant property program. As the dollar amount gets higher and higher, somebody coming in wanting to develop that property, they're like, no way, I don't want to pay that money that I didn't put on this property. So we created the Revive program, and what it does is essentially we'll make an agreement with the prospective buyer to table all of the assessments and vacant property fees, water bills that may be accumulated, and they give us their sort of development plan. They agree to get all the building permits that need to be done. And at the time that a new CO is issued, we'll do another inspection, make sure that property's now move-in ready, and then we will wipe those and remove all those assessments. And the new owner simply just has to pay the recording fee because that was the one that came out of the city's budget. So it's actually been very successful. We've probably done 15 to 20 that have gone into the Revive program, and it's really helped us get these vacant properties redeveloped. And I think it's definitely a tool that I would use if you guys are looking at doing a vacant property ordinance. I think it complements it very well. Beyond that, let's see. How does community development interact with this legislation? I think definitely stabilizing neighborhoods is a big component to the same point where I mentioned the broken window theory, but also affordable housing. If you think of housing as a market, you got supply and demand, and if your supply is chewed up with vacant properties that nobody's living in them, then this can be certainly an avenue to tap that market and bring those properties back into the supply. And that, overall that lowers the affordability for housing. But I think, this last 6 years we've had a lot of success, definitely some learning experiences. Big part of this was the tracking. And we had an Excel spreadsheet, and something would fall through the cracks and wasn't working out. So now we're in the process of actually getting software that's dedicated to this, and I think that's been, or that's going to be helpful. We're currently in the process of building it out right now. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions and go from there. Lauren, you want to take the show?
No, not really. Do any of you have any comments in light of what other folks said that you want to add real quick? Tom's taking like a million notes. I'm not even kidding you. Okay, so this is not the group to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you think of a case where a community would not want to have vacant property registration legislation? Is there any reason why a community would say, nah, we're good? Yeah, I thought they would say.
I don't. No, there's no exception for that. Like I said earlier, with Sandusky, with COVID causing it to tank for a little while, if you know that it's something you're not going to follow through with, it's kind of like with parenting, an if-then statement. If you don't register, then we'll do this. So if you don't have the buy-in to get it to be actually followed through, then I wouldn't waste your time. Which that's why we're all here, is to make things better. So I say no.
Yeah, we're in a good market right now, so housing, it's easier for foreclosures and stuff. They're happening a lot quicker than they were. I think we're seeing 3 months as a quick turnaround for foreclosure when it was, a year to 2 years before. I think now would be the time in a good market if you guys are looking to do this, because you want this in place before the market turns, and you want to. I think the goal of it is to prevent those properties from becoming zombie property, and because then they're a whole other beast on themselves and getting those dealt with. So definitely having a tool in your toolbox to be able to handle those is certainly important.
No, I would just say make sure that your city has the organizational capacity to follow through. I think that was kind of pointed out. We all have those ordinances that kind of sit on the books and aren't really enforced. It is important that if you're going to do this, to make sure that you're committed to follow through with the enforcement.
So just to note and remind you again that in Lebanon, it sits in a completely different department than community development. It was in planning and zoning in Lebanon, it was in community development in Sydney, and it resides with the fire department in Sandusky. So no particular department has to take, a particular department has to take ownership of the process, but it does not have to be one or the other. It's wherever it works best in that community. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, all kinds of questions.
Hold the mic like this.
like pretend it's an ice cream cone that you're never going to get to eat. Okay, because you have.
Thank you so much. I'm with Downtown Middletown Inc., and one of the reasons that we were so passionate about having this presentation here is that we are currently downtown at over 50% vacancy. We are also in a situation where a particular owner owns an outsized amount of property. I believe it's the same owner as the one in Lebanon. So we have legislation in place, but we have no enforcement. So my personal feeling is that we have to have carrots and we have to have sticks. So the stick is the vacant property legislation with enforcement. Can you say a bit more about potential carrots? Like how can you, first of all, incentivize people to restore a building versus demolish? Because we have a lot of historic property, particularly here downtown, and that was one of the concerns from someone in the realty business, that owners would just say, well, this is too onerous, I'm just going to demolish. So I guess a couple of questions. How do you encourage restoration, and how do you prevent demolishing of historic buildings?
I think, we have a lot of incentives in Lebanon to encourage, renovation. So our entire downtown is part of a community reinvestment area. And then we also have kind of a small business renovation grants, direct grants. So I think the carrot for us, and I think your example is a great program, but for us it's really, direct grants or tax incentives to make those types of investments in the historic buildings. So that's a route that we've gone, but my instinct, and again, we're still early on, but my instinct is that a lot of the work that's going to ultimately get done through this program is going to be on the enforcement side and probably not the incentive side.
We do have some grant money that they offer. Like we have okay. Yes. All right. So we do have some grant money. Like there's a grocery store that's currently sitting as one of our vacant commercial buildings, and they were recently given like a $300,000 grant to try to help restore that. So yes, I agree with Scott. Though it's unfortunately in the very forefront, there's a lot of sticks. So, but there are some carrots, if you will, in the middle.
One of the biggest topics in the current day, I just talk about one of the biggest things in turning is the squatter problem. So what you deal with, how to deal with squatters and big buildings. Because it can take months.
So currently for us, the biggest thing is making sure that that building's secured. We have a property that's right along the railroad tracks, and we had some storms come through last August, and it was completely boarded up, doing great renovations inside. Storm comes through, we had a little microburst, blew out a lot of the plywood, and within 12 hours, there was beer bottles and stuff all over the inside, so it doesn't take an amount of time at all. For us, before we secure anything, we always have police go through and clear it, and then we secure it. So for us, that constant policing to make sure things are secured is my experience with it. We just default to law enforcement too.
But law enforcement won't do anything. They'll say you've got to go to the courts.
The legal system definitely complicates this process. I can say that.
I have two-part questions. So I know, do you guys do fire inspections on the vacant buildings? And if so, what's the frequency of it?
So I do not. I just do, essentially our inspection is for residential, is for checking on the structure and sort of just taking a snapshot. So I'll go and take all the pictures, making sure that the next time I come back, if it's gotten worse or better, well, it's not any better unless they put some money into it, but checking to see if it's gotten worse. But our policy, I don't know if it's state or not, but our fire department should be doing a yearly inspection on all commercial structures in the city. So I guess it's just a matter of making sure that your fire department is doing that.
Yeah, kind of same here. Our fire department, they do annual inspections, but I think with this ordinance, it really gives us the ability to get inside and do an inspection on a more regular basis. And our code enforcement inspector will do that with our fire department. So it's important to have that close collaboration between the departments.
My second question was with the implication of not filing or not paying the fee. So all of you submit it to the recorder's office, and then it kind of picks it up on the back end when it sells, or are any of you guys taking those to and act?
I take them to court. A second ago when I said the legal system makes things very complicated. So one of the biggest things that I've ran into with this is LLCs. So we have a couple properties. It's a triangular 5-point intersection. It's a Georgia-owned LLC. And so I go through, I identify it, I mail it, I get the certified mail that the owner of that LLC signs for it, and that's it. It's a dead duck in the water. So then I proceed to write up the charges, take it to the municipal court, and then that's where it dies because it's an LLC outside the state of Ohio. So we recently got a new law director for Sandusky, and he's looking now to then, if it fails on the criminal side, go civilly and start to put a lien towards the property as a way to kind of encourage it that way. So yes, you take them to court, but it's a long drawn out process. I have a specific property. This individual was supposed to register last year, failed to register. By the time it all comes around to get to the court side of things, we're supposed to have court in February. Then they pled not guilty, kicked it to March. Now it's kicked to June. So it's a very arduous process to try to get that. But absolutely, you got to go the distance because overall, most of these people are complying. You just have a couple people that like to push boundaries. And when I say a name of a property, when I go to the building department or I go to code enforcement or I even go up to the city manager's office, that same name resonates with every single department. So you're always going to have your problem childs, but you do got to set that bar to say you'll follow through.
Yeah, I think, our process, we used to do the nice letter at first, and that didn't last long because we weren't getting any responses, so we went right away to getting the certified letter. And then if we don't get a response or anything like that, and we know this property might have some issues, we will use that information that we couldn't make contact to get a search warrant to go into the building. If we go inside, and I'm a building inspector as well for the city, so if I can see that something is structurally compromised or if something is dangerous, then that gives us a whole other avenue, legally wise, to abate that danger or get it fixed or raise or repair. It's a whole different process, and there's a lot more support behind danger code than there is my vacant property, I guess. So that's how we've approached it, and then when we first started doing this, we were operating under the assumption we could do an assessment until we went to the recorder's office, or auditor, I guess, and simply assess this to the property. We were told that it has to be some sort of service that's performed, which is an actual contractor going out doing the work, then that can be assessed. But just a fee cannot be assessed to the property. So sort of the teeth that we thought we had kind of died there. But I think we're able to deal with, I guess, the bigger issue of if it's a dangerous building by going through the search warrant process. Yeah, we run into LLC issues as well, and I don't really have a solution for that.
I have two questions. Back here. Oh, did you need to speak on the last question? Okay. In the case of the Lieutenant, the case of the property owners that maintain their property, however you had mentioned they're picky and just are kind of waiting for the perfect tenant, is there ever a conversation that happens to really push that envelope, like, because it is an economic vitality issue, not just finding the best renter, we want that spot filled?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's on an annual basis. So it's a conversation that I'm the liaison. At the end of the day, the fire chief's, his name's what's on all of our paperwork. I'm just the steward of all of it. So I'm the one people will call, they'll complain, hey, it's not vacant, blah, blah, blah. Or they'll say, hey, come take a look at it. It's completely renovated, we're waiting on a good tenant. So then I'll take that information, I go back to the chief and I'm like, hey, this is where we're at, and he has that decision. So then the majority of the time, the response is, hey, we understand your position. Thank you for contributing to the city. However, when this 1 year period comes back, if it has not been occupied, then you're going to have to register. So it's kind of a 1 year grace period that says, hey, we get what you're doing, but also you still got to do something with it.
Okay, thank you. My second one's a little easier. When it comes to capacity, how many folks do you have that work on this project for each of your cities?
Vacant commercial buildings are mine up until the point that I have to file charges and take it to the city prosecutor. But for the most part, I see it from birth to death. So.
Yeah, I think it's just me for our department as well. I think we originally, we had that number of 800 units originally we thought we were going to have. With that number diminishing, I was able to take on a lot of different responsibilities within my department, such as economic development. So I can still, once you get that first round of vacant property letters and stuff out, because you start off kind of in the hole already, but once you get that up and going and can continuously do it every year, it becomes a lot easier. You get some time back to be able to do other stuff.
Yeah, we did not add any staff when we launched it. We kind of just rolled it into our property maintenance inspector's job duties, and he works closely with our city planner and then obviously our city attorney. And I would obviously recommend that your city attorney needs to be on board with this, because I do think from a compliance standpoint, there's going to be a handful of folks that court is the only way you're going to get movement on it. So the city attorney is heavily involved in it as well.
Great, thank you all.
I just wanted to quickly, I think Sydney mentioned it, but where do the fees go? Fire suppressant things in Sydney, or in Sandusky, Sandusky, but can it ever go to like pay for other inspectors to manage it, or for main streets, or for architectural assessments of these buildings? Can any of those dollars be used for that?
So the way that the ordinance is currently written, there's been a line item that's created by our finance director that when these fees come in, they go specifically to that fund. That was something that we've kind of seen over time, because when there wasn't a designated fund, that money kind of slipped into the general fund, and then it's like a unicorn, it's gone. However, the way that the ordinance is, it's specifically for fire prevention type things, whether that's new equipment for hazard specific things. So currently, when COVID hit and that money disappeared, we started out at zero. So right now, there's really not a whole lot of money in that account that it would amount to anything. I think it'd be a great alternative to say, hey, we have this money, we could justify more staff, but currently we don't have that option.
Ours just rolls back in the general fund.
Details on how you define a vacancy from the commercial side. We have storefronts that are owned by business owners using them as antique storage, more like for supposed online businesses that they say they sell some of their things from. So how do you approach that with them saying, it's not vacant, this is occupied, we're utilizing this? It's questionable.
Great question. And that's pretty much like I said, it's once your initial round of letters go out, and I first go through like the battery of people calling with those types of complaints, and they just kind of berate you. So the first thing is just let them drain that emotional bubble, get that out of the way, and then proceed to educate them on the point of what the basis of this is. Reiterate it's a safety component, not a moneymaker. That helps to kind of defuse a lot of people. The other component, though, as far as identifying that, so, I've had our city manager send me a picture of properties, our administrative assistant. So basically, when we see a building that looks ran down, or we see something that a business has moved out of and it's vacant, I send the letter. So the way that our chief looks at it is it's up to the property owner to prove otherwise. So if it appears vacant, I'm sending out the letters. So then they have to contact me, and then we either set up their routine annual fire inspection, or we'll set up the vacant building inspection. But it really comes back on them proving that it's not being, not vacant. So then I have to run kind of in collaboration with zoning, because I have multiple properties that people are like, no, it's not vacant. I use it for storage. So then I go to our zoning map and I see that's general business. So then at that point, I've identified it vacant. I tell them they got to register, and they can make a zoning appeal, which oftentimes in these specific cases it fails because it's general business. So with that, then it's more ammunition to say, hey, like, you can't use it for what you're using it for, so either sell it, develop it, do something. But yeah, you will get a lot of those calls. So we rely heavily on zoning for that, to reinforce that it's an unauthorized use of the original zoning.
Yeah, similar for us. We, in our definition of vacant building, we actually put in used for other than a permitted use of zoning district in which it is located, unless the owner can provide documentation of a legal non-conforming use. So it really puts the burden on them. And this has helped us in a lot of neighborhoods where old sort of corner markets used to be, that now turned into just storage facilities. We're able to approach them with the zoning aspect of it and say, well, you know, unless you can prove to us that back when our zoning code was adopted in 1964, that this was a storage facility, then you have to register that property now as vacant. And we've had a lot of success with those properties turning over and being reused and redeveloped. So that's how we approach it.
I was just going to add, we have a stipulation that at least half of the building needs to be used, in a manner that's consistent with the zoning. So we do kind of provide, some sort of a threshold there.
So it sounds like Lebanon has a citywide ordinance, not just downtown area?
Correct.
That's same with the other two?
Yeah. Yep.
And you mentioned that 50% had to be occupied in accordance with the zoning. Do you have exceptions for that to big on the building? In other words, if you look at the four corners right here, these are like 8 or 9 story buildings. And it would be difficult, I think, to have 50% of those filled.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, the only exception would be if, the other space is being actively either, for lease or to sell. So there is the exception that if there's an active intent to lease out that vacant space, that will kind of get you a 12-month, exemption period. But yeah, we don't, we did want to kind of put that stipulation that at least half the building is used for its, zoning designation.
Mine is kind of a follow-up to what Roger just asked. We have a number of mixed-use buildings. So we have storefronts that are vacant, and then potentially second, third floors that are residentially used that are vacant. And we also have the opposite, where we have storefronts that are occupied, and then the upper floors that are vacant. So how do your ordinances treat these? Can you still say with a building that say has a occupied storefront but vacant upper stories, does that fall into the definition of being vacant, and then you're managing or you're pretty much tracking the activity there, or how does that work?
Yeah, for us, unoccupied would be, half of the floor space, but then also the definition says at least half of the residential units. So we'd be looking at both, correct?
Yeah, ours does not address any of that. So if it's under one ownership and they have 2 storefronts, if they've got somebody in there on one, then we don't look at we look at the whole building itself, not just yeah. If somebody's in there, then the whole thing's not going to be vacant at all. Similar to like a shopping strip, if it's under one ownership and all of the storefronts are empty except for one, then that building won't be considered vacant.
And we're the same, so we have a lot of the taxpayers type structures downtown where we do have residential on floors 2 and 3. The storefront is vacant. So we look at it as, again, yes, one owner, it's mostly occupied. So that's where futuristically we're looking at addressing that type of thing more so on the building code side of things. But if any portion of that building, we don't have a specific percentage. If it's occupied, then it doesn't make the list.
Thank you. Are there any additional incentives or things that you feel kind of improve the likelihood that folks would engage in these kinds of activities more positively, or and I'm thinking of facade grants or things that are going to see where they could see that benefit. Do you have any additional things that you would prefer?
For the fire department, no, I know our city, and I'm not completely in tune with that. I know that they have a lot of grant opportunities to encourage these types of things. For example, one building that I had on our vacant building registry is a church. It meets the historical requirements. The cornerstone's like 1836. The lady does not have she's an elderly lady, she does not have the capacity to do anything with it. But there's a lot of stained glass and relics that are in there. So then I directed her to community development to help guide towards, would somebody in the historical society have contacts with somebody that would want to redevelop it. So that's as much as I've done as far as incentives, but.
I think, for the redevelopment, we have residential CRA, that's automatically a 15-year, 100% tax abatement on the improved value added to that property. On top of that, we have in community development, we have a neighborhood pride grant that is for neighborhood revitalization altogether, not necessarily just vacant properties. And this was kind of born out of, we had a Paint the Town program where you could paint one property every year, and there was just a big pay for it. And we've had it in the book for 30 years, and it kind of had a lot of, we got less and less applicants every year. The last couple of years we had none. So that money didn't get used. The last one we did was, they had this White House that was, it was beautiful, but they painted it white again. So really the impact that we thought it would have on the community really wasn't there because it just still looked like a white. Which I mean, it's not bad, but you hope putting the dollars into the community like that, you're getting some sort of impact. So we came up with the Neighborhood Pride Grant. Did away with that program, came up with the Neighborhood Pride Grant. What that does is an applicant is considered a cluster of houses, so 3 to 5 houses apply for this $1,000 per house, and it's a matching fund. So $1,000, they have to put in $1,000, then we'll put in total project of like $2,000 is the maximum they could do, or they spend more but they only get $1,000. And we've had pretty good success with that the last couple of years. And actually, it's not limited to renters or homeowners. Anybody can apply because those properties exist in the neighborhood. A lot of people are like, we don't want to give money to these landlords, but the property still exists and it's still a contributing part of that neighborhood. So we've had a lot of successes. The last couple years have been landlords, and they owned clusters of houses together. And they completely renovated the properties. So the first time we had 5, they were all in the same block. They completely painted the properties, put new torches on, handrails. Everything on the outside looked beautiful. And it really made an impact in an area that hadn't seen investment in a long time. So we've had a lot of successes with that program. And if you're interested, you can reach out to me or go on our website and see more about that program. But we've had a lot of success.
Yeah, I would just add, we do for commercial properties, we have a $10,000 facade improvement grant where property owners can, get a matching grant of up to $10,000 for facade improvements.
Yeah, obviously, we have a lot of out-of-town owners.
It is, depending on how these fees go.
Is there
Any ideas for when you might take foreclosure? From payment of the fees and not doing anything?
Well, I know one thing that our code does address in terms of out-of-town owners is they have to, when if it gets triggered to where they have to register, they have to designate a local, somebody local to manage the property. So that is one criteria to try to kind of drive that accountability. But for us, we really are treating these as any other property maintenance violation, where we'll send out a violation notice, typically give them 30 days to comply. We'll send out a second notice. If they don't comply after that second notice, then we'll take them to court.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind the vacant property fees cannot be put on the tax roll as an assessment. So we don't actually build up that vacant property fee to a point where it could be foreclosed on. The only thing we can do is that you just have to wait and see if they're paying their property taxes to see if they can be foreclosed on or not for that 365 days. But yeah, it's unfortunate because we originally adopted this. We thought we could do that and it would allow us to foreclose on properties, but we couldn't do it.
And I'm just starting to go down that process with our new law director and getting on board with the building department to get things declared a nuisance, so that way we can start that route. But I currently don't have any experience with that.
What does the big problem get from
So the fee that they are paying, it's literally just leverage to get them to do something with the building, with the hopes that when they submit a development plan, that money will come right back to them. So we've got, there's a place in our downtown area. They are creating, it's called Sip and Spin. It's supposed to be a record soda pop type place. So they've submitted all the official architectural drawings. This is my plan, this is what I'm doing. And as long as they meet that, within that, their $400 then goes back to them. So it's more of just kind of a safety deposit to try to encourage people to comply.
Hi, thank you. So Lebanon may not have this answer yet because you haven't been at it, but one of the things that we have been told by a city employee is that it's just too expensive to file a lawsuit against the landowner, so the city doesn't want to be a part of this. So I am wondering if those of you who have had these for a while, have you looked at, recorded, or been able to basically market how this has benefited your community to decide this is important, that it is worth making sure buildings are safe, and to see what you can do about getting buildings occupied, because then you're generating revenue from the property taxes and the taxes paid to employees and the sales tax that customers are paying. So do any of you have information on the positive community impact of making sure you don't have a whole bunch of empty properties?
For Sandusky specifically, in the year and a half that I've kind of been the steward of this program, fortunately for us, all of the city commissioners, the city manager, everybody's on board with it, so I haven't really had to advocate for this program. The numbers of going from over 130 vacant buildings down to less than 15 is what we use as marketing. When I spoke to the former fire marshal that was the steward of this for about 11 to 12 years, when this program was initially rolled out, they sent out roughly 150 to 200 certified letters by the time they factored in owners and the statutory agents. Sent them out, and then he went on vacation. So kind of like pulling the pin, throwing the grenade, he goes on vacation. When he comes back, his voicemail box is full. The emails are never ending of people, similar to that question I was asked earlier on, well, that doesn't apply to me. So fortunately, I think we have enough people in other city administrative positions that advocate for that I've personally never had to go out and give those presentations. When this ordinance was first rolled out, there were a lot of community meetings where we were presenting on, okay, this is the safety element. Being the fire department, we always hinge our stuff on the life safety side, but I do know that we have other administrators that focus on the financial gain from it, so I've never had to go that route.
haven't really had to promote it, really. I don't think it's at the forefront of a lot of people's minds unless it's affecting them directly. So I guess it could be, to your point, it might be something that we look into doing is marketing it more and doing that. So.
Yeah, I would say, we do have a well-established property maintenance program. So we've had cases where there's been property maintenance issues and the property was vacant, before our registration program. Going through the process of getting it into the court system for us has triggered decisions by the property owner to sell the property, which is a good outcome. I think for us, if they can't or aren't able to maintain the property or activate it, then we'd like to see them sell it and get it into somebody that can. So I think it's been a good process to actually get the property in an activated state.
Time for one more question.
All right, I have a question. So if Heritage Ohio was able to get funding, would you be willing to participate in an economic impact study of your programs?
Yeah, see why not.
Hopefully the answer is yes, because we'll just be bringing money to take your data and make it work better for you. All right, cool.
We're in.
So I'd like to thank our panelists, Scott Bronco, City Manager of the City of Lebanon, Kyle Havner, Community Development Specialist with the City of Sydney, and Lieutenant Tom Selman, with Fire Prevention Officer for the City of Sandusky Fire Department. If I could get a round of applause. We're going to take about a 10-minute break.